You're still tuned in to Rubbin Minds. And now you'll agree with me that with the advent of technology, social media in particular, there are certain topics that are no longer out of bounds. Now we're saying it, as we say in local parlors, with our full chest. There are topics that are being discussed every time. And one of such topics is the issue of mental health. We're now having a lot of conversations around mental health. It's no longer seen as weary or madness. It's actually seen for what it is, which is a medical condition. The same way you'll treat headache is the same way that you'll treat depression in terms of receiving treatment. So the issue of mental health keeps coming up. We have days dedicated to it. We have months dedicated to the issue of mental health, and more organizations and people are paying attention to this topic. So joining me in the studio is the founder of Us Therapy and a clinical psychologist, Anu Jideojo. Welcome to Rubbin Minds.
Thank you for having me.
No, let's just jump into the topic.
Yes.
When we look at mental health in Nigeria, is it getting the much needed attention? Are we at a good place compared to other countries? Or do you feel that it's still a taboo, maybe offline?
I think we're making progress, but mostly online. A lot of times there's this sort of isolation that happens with social media where people think that whatever is happening on social media is like representative of what's happening everywhere, But until the passerby, the normal layman understands like depression, anxiety, can speak to their symptoms until, say, you can call off work, say, I'm really anxious and I would like to have today off, and they would actually understand the same way you understand when you're like experiencing, some physical ailments. That's when I would mark that as progress, but some progress is happening.
So you're saying that the average Nigerian still hasn't gotten with the program when it comes to mental health. Do you think this is the fault of the education system, or do you think that people are not taking those online conversations to the streets, to the people that it matters the most to?
It's a combination of a number of things. Yes, there is the role that education plays in. Mental health education has a way to go. A lot of time the conversation is happening in English when, what is depression in Yoruba, what is depression in Urhobo, what is depression in, the 250 languages that we speak. That is what access means, when the person that can't speak English to a huge extent still understands what they're saying and they can communicate their symptoms. There's also the part where like systemic issues play into mental health, not just, you're not just depressed, there are symptoms that contribute to it. And when those, systemic issues happen, until they are solved, mental health issues can't really be solved, because someone that is poor, you can suggest therapy from today till tomorrow, but the issue of poverty is still there. So that sort of hinders like their progress in many ways.
It's interesting you bring up the conversation on access.
Yes.
And affordability.
Yes.
It's one thing to have this therapy there, but how affordable is it? And how can we make it more accessible? Just like the conversation to ensure that more people are able to get the help that they require.
I think when you think about accessibility, it goes beyond private practitioners. There are neuropsychiatric hospitals that offer therapy sessions at 5,000 naira per session to 15,000 naira per session, and they're highly qualified psychologists and psychiatrists. And there are also non-governmental organizations that offer community mental health services like STARE, the Initiative for Equal Rights, and a bunch of other people that have qualified psychologists on board, and they're ready to take in clients, on the go. So yes, there's still the problem of accessibility, but there are people actively trying to solve this problem. And we think we should go beyond seeing therapy as just a thing for private practitioners and like thinking about therapy as, it's so expensive. There are neuropsychiatric hospitals that do a fantastic job.
It's interesting you say that, government hospitals, when we think about mental health, at least in Lagos, we think about Yaba Left, we think about Arrow, outside Lagos, and the reputation around these medical institutions leaves a lot to be desired. People don't want to see themselves going to those places or hear that they are associated with these institutions. What can be done to encourage people to own it and to seek help at these institutions where the price is not as high compared to the private institutions?
I think we can normalize talking about our experiences with mental health. We can just like slip it into our daily conversations. Also, we can go about it the same way the government went about like AIDS education, you know, having media shows, TV drama, novels, different sort of stories being told about AIDS, normalizing these stories and making sure that this is not a death sentence. So they can say that depression, schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, these things that people see and they mock and say like weary or whatever. When they see that, okay, these are the symptoms behind schizophrenia, this is why, these are the drugs that you would use, they will be able to normalize those people's experiences and empathize with them and humanize it. So that gap between what that person is experiencing and what you're seeing is bridged. So I think we can go about it the same way we went about like the AIDS epidemic. Yeah.
So that's on the part of the government in normalizing these conversations and putting it out there in the media and the schools.
Yeah.
But now let's talk about the individual units. Let's talk about the family.
Yeah.
A lot of times when there are cases of mental health within a family, it's hush-hush. People don't want it to go out. And there's also the issue of the religious institutions. What role can they play in ensuring that, you know, this medical challenge gets the same kind of attention, like you said, as AIDS or any of these other diseases?
I think a lot of times with the religious institutions, one, we say it as either or. When they say, oh, would you like to go to therapy? They say it as you questioning their faith. So you can like approach it and empathize with them like, hey, I get what you're trying to say. Your belief is giving you hope and there's something there. But how about we collaborate with you and your pastor so that while your pastor is like going hard for you on the spiritual realm, we are here like physically and mentally collaborating with you on your mental health journey. So there can be that collaboration with pastors, ministers, and people that already have their ear. It's not against them, it's a collaboration with them. So I think that's a way to go with that.
And then what about the families? How do we get families to speak up, to say, yes, this person is going through this challenge, this is to stand by the person and not be ashamed or keep it hush-hush?
With families, we may have to play the long-term game. For example, if the mom is open to like going to the therapist or to the psychiatrist, the father may not be. So we have to speak to the person that has the father's ear. It might be the head of the family, the external family. It could be the pastor or the imam or the imam, whoever is their religious leader. It's going to be a collaboration with people that already have their ear, because when we go by ourselves, they may already be defensive. But if we go when we go to the spaces that they already occupy, we already have their ear and we can like listen to them first of all before proposing our solution.
So essentially it's all hands on deck.
Yes.
But now let's look at the therapy itself, the solution. I have a story from my producer saying a lady goes to seek therapy and throughout the session she's essentially gaslighted. So how safe are these spaces with these therapists? Is there anybody regulating the practice, and how can people feel that they're safe and protected and they're not going to be gaslighted essentially?
That's sad. Yes, there is a body. There's the Nigerian Association of Clinical Psychologists, and there's also the Nigerian Medical Association for Psychiatrists. And with finding a medical practitioner or a psychologist, sometimes you may need to like shop for therapists that have the same values with you. I have consultation sessions where clients come in and say, I hope you're not going to come in and preach, asking if it's going to be a faith-based session. And I go, no, it's not going to be a faith-based session. These are my values. These are some of the things you can call me out on. These are some of the, like, you're guaranteed 100% confidentiality and things like that. So yes, therapy is a way, but we have therapists that have, we need to call into check. So in that situation, for the sake of, your friend, she would have to like leave that therapist and find someone else that is more collaborative with her, willing to listen to her and prioritizes her needs. Yeah.
And when we talk about medical issues or challenges, we look at preventive measures. measures. So in the case of mental health, are there preventive measures to ensure that less people fall into depression or schizophrenia or any of these mental health challenges?
Yes, there are a number. On a systemic level, it's things like food, clothes, shelter, access to education, things like that. On an individual level, there's daily exercise, there's having a proper sleep routine, there is journaling, taking walks, learning healthy coping mechanisms to deal with uncomfortable emotions like anger, jealousy, heaviness, because, I mean, we live in Lagos, that is the second most stressful city in the world. So how do you navigate having a tough day? So learning all of these skills would help prevent, the long-term impact.
Well, they say prevention is better than cure. Thank you so much, Anu Jide Ojo, the founder of Us Therapy and a clinical psychologist, for joining us on Rubbin Minds.